Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Tuesday to you. It's October the 29th. It is a warm and rather humid day across Acadiana. And believe it or not, yep, there's a couple of showers on the radar. Thank goodness I put that 10% rain chance in early this morning. And I think those rain chances will pick up a little bit more on Wednesday and then a little bit more as we go into Thursday. I know, unfortunately, that's Halloween, but that's sometimes how things start to change as when it comes to our fall season. We've had all of these dry days, and of course now the trick-or-treaters are coming around. We're going to get that chance for some rain in here. But I had a comment earlier on Facebook. I'm a Gen X guy, and I lived in the Midwest, so we went trick-or-treating in the rain, in the heat, in the cold, sometimes some freezing rain, even a little bit of snow at some times. There was really nothing that was going to stop us to get out there and trick-or-treat. And also put a picture on that comment, too, of my boys back in 2013. I think they were 11 and 13 at the time, but they went out during that raging heavy downpour. There was no lightning, so I did let them go, but it was a raging, just incredible rains and flooded roads and everything. I let them go anyway. They were dying to go. I went ahead and let them go. They racked up with so much candy that year because literally as they went to people's doors, none of these folks had any trick-or-treaters, and we have a busy neighborhood of trick-or-treat kids. But that particular year, there was nobody out there, and they just basically dumped their entire bowl of candy on my boys. So they had to make a couple of pit stops back at the house to empty the pillowcase that they were carrying around to fill up. So I know there's chances for rain out there, but if it does rain, for especially some of the kids that might be a little bit older, you might score some good stuff out there. So let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to look back on an anniversary again, and this is Hurricane Juan. And of course, you know, I'm in my 50s now, so for some reason, everybody in the world got way younger, and they don't remember stuff like this back in 1985, but Hurricane Juan was a very interesting type of system that developed in the central part of the Gulf of Mexico and then lifted northward, did a couple of loop-de-loops there, and made landfall as a Category 1 hurricane right around Morgan City on October the 29th. So this is the latest in the season hurricane to hit Louisiana. Now, I did look back in the records, and there's one I saw, you know, in some blogs about an unnamed system in 1861, but the only one I could find actually was something that hit in the early part of November. It was like Halloween, November 1st, but it hit Florida, and it hit the southwestern coast of Florida. So I'm not sure if we're talking about the same, but from the research that I've done going back over the last 100 years, I could not find a hurricane that hit Louisiana during the month of November. We've had a couple of close calls kind of drift their way right off the coast of southeastern Louisiana, where the mouth of the Mississippi rolls out into the Gulf of Mexico. There were a couple of near misses, but not an actual landfall. This was a landfall, though, back on October the 29th. And you can see there with the forecast track, this was a crazy one. Developed there in the middle part of the Gulf of Mexico, kind of lifted its way north. It did a loop right before making landfall, and then kind of spun its way westward south of Cameron Parish, and then looped its way back around and came in from the southwest and landed at Morgan City, made landfall, then made a second loop and went back out into the Gulf of Mexico, kind of steering its way around the southeastern coast of Louisiana, and then making its way into the coastal sections there, Florida, Alabama. I think Dauphin Island was actually that secondary landfall, but that came as a tropical storm. So an unusual Hurricane Juan, an unusual time for a hurricane to strike land. And as far as I can see, I have not seen a hurricane that has made landfall in Louisiana during the month of November. So Hurricane Juan, the latest one that we have on record. Outside, we've got a mix of sun and clouds. Those temperatures up to 82 with a heat index now at 85. That dew point's really been climbing, and you may have noticed there wasn't as much fog out there this morning, and a lot of that had to do with some elevated winds, not just at the surface, but also just above the surface. So we kind of lucked out a little bit. I mean, I know Monday was a rough one with all that dense fog out there, but a lot of times when you get these higher dew points, you've got a trough that's digging in the west, a ridge that's pushing out in the east. We get that pressure gradient to tighten up. So wind speeds stay a little bit stronger, but we get that flow that comes from the offshore waters. And again, check it out. I didn't know if any of the radars even worked anymore. This is our 35th day without rain here in Lafayette, without measurable rainfall. But you can see that on the radar, there are a few showers moving their way across Terrebonne Parish and even into lower St. Martin. You folks in Morgan City and Amelia might even get a couple of sprinkles out of this. And then you got a couple of more that stretch their way down into portions of Lafourche Parish, getting down into the areas around Grand Isle, and then south down toward the mouth of the Mississippi River. Now that's coming from the Slidell radar. Lake Charles radar picking up a couple echoes here and there south of Cameron Parish, but I'm not really seeing a lot that would affect the majority of the Acadiana area. So I'll go ahead and leave that rain chance there at about 10% for the rest of the day. And looking at the traffic cams, you can see the Breaux Bridge cam kind of shaking a little bit. That's with some of those gustier winds. Of course, the camera is considerably higher than the surface there, so you get a little wind elevated there, and you can start to see some cumulus clouds on the Ambassador Caffrey cam there. So there is a little bit of moisture out there, and there's going to be some lift, but boy, it'd be really cool to see an isolated shower. It's just been a very, very long time since we've seen the rain. And what's happening is we've got a fairly deep trough that's now digging here across the western part of the country. A ridge of high pressure pushing off toward the east, so you get that southerly flow that comes in, and that's bringing the extra moisture. And we're going to be seeing that building here over the next couple of days. That trough that's out to the west is probably going to stall out right about in this particular area, if it lets me draw the line. And then it's going to kind of sit there on Thursday, bringing a better chance for showers. Friday, there will still be a chance for rain as the front dissipates. And on Saturday, I think any chances for showers are going to stay a little bit farther to our northwest. So it is the best rain chance we've seen in quite some time. So get ready for that. Hopefully we won't get anything super heavy because the ground is solid as a rock, and you get a big tropical type of downpour that dumps several inches of rain in a short period of time. That's going to be all runoff, and that's going to flood streets. But hopefully we will see this coming in a little bit lighter and let the ground kind of open up a little bit. And also that pressure gradient between the ridge of high pressure to the east and the trough out to the west is producing some higher than normal seas. We're looking at 3 to 4 feet right there along the coast, maybe about 4 to 8 as you get in the far offshore waters. There have been some fairly gusty winds out there. So the skies are really nice across the Gulf of Mexico, but for boating, it's probably not going to be the best of days, and some of the platforms might be rocking and rolling a little bit with the elevated winds and the higher seas that are out there. But as far as the Gulf of Mexico, we don't have any worries out there, at least for the next couple of days. Where we are more concerned, though, is this area across the western part of the Caribbean Sea, and we've seen kind of a flare-up of some thunderstorms. There is a bit of a trough that's here along the Nicaraguan coast, and there's a bit of a tropical wave a little bit farther off toward the west, and that ridge of high pressure farther to the north there. So all of that coming together is tending to lower the pressures here in this western part of the Caribbean Sea. And that's really the area that the National Hurricane Center has been watching. And I've been watching this now for about a week and a half as some of those long-range extended models have been showing some development there. And the Global Tropics Hazard Outlook that we'll update a little bit later on this afternoon. That's a 2 to 3 week forecast, has also been showing the possibility of some development over the western part of the Caribbean. And to tell you the truth, looking at the new models that just rolled off, there's a lot of agreement. Remember, yesterday we had virtually no agreement except that the models were trying to push something into the western part of the Caribbean, but the direction of movement and the intensity was way off base. But we've got a little bit more agreement, at least on the latest runs and the runs that came earlier this morning. So we've got a little bit of consistency there. And as we look at the rest of the tropical Atlantic satellite, again, you've got a bit of a tropical wave that's right here on the Nicaraguan coast, another one that's kind of here right around Colombia, another one here that's just made its way through the Windward Islands and kind of drapes across the northern part of Venezuela, and then you got another tropical wave that's out here in the Atlantic Ocean. So by November standards, we still got quite a bit of quite a few tropical waves out there, so a little bit more elevated activity than you would normally see during the month of November. And of course, the National Hurricane Center, as of the early 7-day tropical outlook, is still showing about a 40% chance that we'll see some development there over the next 7 days. And right now it looks like most of the models are trying to get some development going as we go into the weekend. So we're not going to see a whole lot here in the next few days, but Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I think we'll probably see something a little more defined there over the western part of the Caribbean Sea. Of course, the water temperatures are plenty warm there. Everything well over 80 degrees, and really most of the Gulf of Mexico and the western Atlantic is over 80. We're starting to cool down below that 80-degree mark now, right along the coast. So those shallower waters that are on the continental shelf there off the Gulf of Mexico, and then just there along the eastern coast, we're starting to see some of those water temperatures coming down. And the tropical cyclone heat potential has really dropped off a lot in the Gulf of Mexico, although it's still high enough that if you get something over there, it would still be able to develop. Not rapid development, but if you get something out here where you got that high heat potential, and especially if you get a small system, kind of like we saw with Milton and Oscar, you could get something to whip up pretty quick, especially if they're tiny little storms. So that's kind of the concern there over the western part of the Caribbean, that the waters are warm enough, the tropical cyclone heat potential is high enough, and if the wind shear drops off, you might be able to get something to develop there, and could develop rather quickly too. So let's just go through the model suite here, and we're going to stop these on day 10 so I can show you the differences and the similarities there between the models. And the GFS shows low pressure kind of developing and moving there over the eastern part of the Atlantic Ocean. To tell you the truth, I don't know if that is the most recent model that's there. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of go back and let that run for just a second. I'm going to see if I can get the latest run of the GFS, where it is showing a little bit more of a western type of movement with a possible tropical system. So there is the possibility we could see something moving perhaps a little bit closer to home as we get something a little bit more defined to develop, and possibly move up to around Puerto Rico and then kind of drift off toward the west. And that would be something that could be a potential threat to parts of the southeastern United States. And as far as this is concerned, let's go ahead and get that new graphic dropped in there. Hopefully this will change for you. And there is the latest model run there. You can see low pressure now developing there over the far southwestern part of the Caribbean, and then the low starting to drift around a ridge of high pressure that moves a little bit closer to the Yucatan Channel. So that's something that's a little bit different compared to some of the other models. A lot of the models had something developing about here and then kind of shooting off in this direction. But you see, not only do you have that, but you might have a double kind of a low kind of spinning off of the main. So you got the main low there, and then you get a little bit of a low that spins off of it, and then it starts to drift a little bit farther toward the west, and then you've got something heading toward the Yucatan Channel, but you also got something here over parts of the Caribbean, so the western Atlantic. So there's what it looks like for day 10. So we can stop it there. So again, as I mentioned in the Facebook post, as well as the description that we have below here in this video, there's a potential for 1, 2, and I've even got models that might be indicating 3 named storms going into the month of November, which has happened before. It's not as unusual as you think, and we're going to look at some of those November numbers coming up in just a little bit. But there's the Euro model, and the Euro model, again, very slowly has a low pressure area develop, and then it starts to make its way a little bit more off toward the northwest in some of those final frames, and that's November 4th, November 5th, November 6th, and Thursday, November 7th, and then it ends on Friday, November the 8th, which is a week from Friday. So versus the GFS, there's the Euro, and there's the GFS. So you do have low pressure kind of in the same general area there, kind of in the Western Caribbean, perhaps in the Yucatan Channel. Now check out the Canadian model. The Canadian model is a little more robust on developing something over the western part of the Caribbean. And very much like the Euro, it kind of lifts northward toward Jamaica and then takes more of a turn toward the northwest and gets into the Yucatan Channel. And this one, this particular model is pushing a system into the Gulf of Mexico around a ridge of high pressure, which a little hard to see here at the surface, but you've got a ridge that's right here that's going to kind of slide off into that direction, and the GFS and the Euro both are showing that. And then you got a trough that's digging out here in the west. Sometimes that can catch things and pull those off toward the north. And as we've seen with Hurricane Juan back in 1985, we've seen development kind of in this area, and we ended up having a Louisiana landfall. So not very likely, but not impossible either. So here's our final model, the Icon. And again, you're going to see that slow development of low pressure there near Panama, and then kind of starting to wind up and lift its way northward toward Jamaica. And then that ridge of high pressure over the Carolinas starts to slide off toward the east, and it kind of tugs on this low and then kind of pulls it up toward the north. Now remember, the icon only goes out 7 days, but you can see even on the icon model, not only does it have a tropical system right here near Jamaica, and that ridge of high pressure here forecast to kind of go in that direction, which could possibly pull this off toward the northwest, but you're also seeing maybe another low pressure here. So could we have a Patty? Could we have a Raphael? Could we even have a Sarah? There is a possibility there over the next several days. So just to go through the 4 of them on that last frame. So again, this is for November 8th. This is not this Friday. This is the following Friday. So a week from Friday, you've got a fairly strong tropical system near the Yucatan and one near the Bahamas. That's on the GFS. The Euro model has a developing low pressure heading toward the Yucatan Channel. And then the Canadian model has a bona fide hurricane near the Yucatan Peninsula 10 days from now. So you got some consistency. They're all in the same neighborhood there. And then the icon model, again, only going out 7 days, has something fairly strong there near Jamaica. But that could be an indication in days 8, 9, and 10 that don't show up on this, that it could be drifting off toward the west-northwest. So again, it's not very likely that this would come into the Gulf of Mexico, but just by looking at some of the latest models, and I've seen some solutions that are very similar to this, I wouldn't get rid of all of the hurricane supplies just yet, because I've said this whole time it's been a very weird hurricane season. It's been kind of bottom heavy when it comes to the number of storms. We started out kind of robust, and then we went absolutely silent for about 6 weeks, and then we just have been gangbusters through September and most of October with some really devastating hurricanes, including 5 that have made landfall on the Gulf Coast this time around. The record is 6, so we've already had a couple of October surprises. Let's hope we don't have a November to remember. But let's look at the wind shear, and right now there's tons of wind shear through the Yucatan Channel, the Bahamas, Cuba. There's a little bit of a weakness there over the far southwestern part of the Caribbean, but look what happens by Monday, November 4th. So this is in a little less than a week, and you can see that the wind shear really starts to drop off over the western part of the Caribbean, and it also tends to drop off quite a bit over the parts of the Gulf of Mexico. And again, this is a model run that ran earlier this morning, but it still shows maybe a tropical system heading a little farther to the east. But as I showed you, the GFS has something a little bit farther to the west now. And that fits right in with that global tropics hazard outlook, which, by the way, will be updated probably in about 2 or 3 hours. So I'll have this for you. It'll be really interesting because last week it was, of course, showing a little bit of elevated activity perhaps here in the western part of the Caribbean, and that's basically what we're talking about. So this was issued last week, and even the one that came the week before had that area as a hot spot, but it still keeps it a bit hot here going into the following week, and we'll have to see what the new version that comes down later today has. But of course, all that is very similar to what we would see as far as past development and tracks of tropical storms and hurricanes during the month of November. The majority of those will happen over the western part of the Caribbean, and then they tend to turn more toward the northeast, toward the Bahamas and the western part of the Atlantic. And the number of tropical storms and hurricanes drops off considerably during the month of November, but it's not zero. And the number of tropical storms and hurricanes that occur in November are slightly higher than what you would see for the first month of hurricane season back in June. And just to give you an idea of the last several years, last year, I made a mistake yesterday saying that 2023 had 3 named storms in November. I was wrong. It's 2022, where we had 3 Category 1 hurricanes, Lisa, Martin, and Nicole. And then back in 2021, we had Tropical Storm Wanda. And then the crazy season of 2020, we had Hurricane Eta, which actually made landfall in Florida as a tropical storm, but at one time it was a Category 4 hurricane moving across the parts of the Caribbean, then working its way eastward over Cuba, then backing its way over Florida, and then turning its way back to the northeast. Kind of made landfall about the same place where Debbie and Helene have made landfall this year. And then we also had Tropical Storm Theta, and then Hurricane Iota was a Category 4. So we had 2 major hurricanes during during November of 2020. And then back in 2019, we had subtropical storm Rebecca and tropical storm Sebastian. So you're talking about 3, 6, 7, 9 hurricanes and tropical storms have occurred just in the last 5 years during the month of November. So that number might surprise a few of you. It kind of surprised me too. I figure it's going to be about 0 to 1 every year. And I'd have to really go back and do some more digging to see what the average is for November. But just looking at this, you're talking about 1 to 2 just about every year on average during the month of November. Fortunately, most of those don't go into the Gulf of Mexico, but as I've said, this has been kind of a weird type of year, and hopefully we won't see anything coming in here. And I got a question here from Wayne. Do you think the Atlantic hurricanes are finished for 2024 or more to come? Well, if you just joining us, if you want to rewind and look at what we were talking about, I think we're probably going to have at least 2 more tropical storms or hurricanes before the hurricane season ends. And some of the models are talking about maybe 3 just in the next couple of weeks. So who knows? We could have a number of systems, or we could end up with 0. A lot of that's going to depend on the wind shear this time. So Wayne, hopefully we're almost done, but I still think we're going to see 1, maybe 2 named storms. I'm not sure about hurricanes, but named storms are a pretty good possibility here coming up over the next couple of weeks or so. So hopefully I answered that question. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, turn on those notifications, and make sure you tell your friends, because I like everybody visiting here on this midday show. It's a lot of fun to kind of get to know what's going on in the tropics and how we forecast things. And don't forget, in the description below, there are a whole bunch of links down there. You can click on those, and you can basically look at all of the products that I'm using, because they're all available for free. And that's why it's so cool to do this YouTube thing. We don't have any super secret forecasts on this channel. You can access all of this stuff at home, and you can look at all the models in between what I'm showing here on Let's Talk Tropics. Also, don't forget, in just a little bit of a week's time, on November the 4th, that is Monday, all of my weather forecasts will be heard on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. I will also remain on YouTube, and I believe those 3 radio stations will be embedding my morning weather forecast, video weather forecast that I do each and every day on their websites and their social media pages too. So getting the reach out to a few more people here in Acadiana. One of the things I love about this group, Acadiana Broadcasting Company, Big 102, Planet Radio, and Freedom, are all owned by a company that is right here in Louisiana. It's actually in Crowley. And all of the folks that work here, they all live here, and they shop here, they pay their taxes here. So we are a very local company here, which is a great thing to see in this weird world of broadcasting that has been happening over the last couple of years. So please listen to Big 102 Planet Radio and Freedom 95.1. And also, in between all of those broadcasts, you can follow my social media pages both on Facebook as well as X. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. I hope you all have a great Tuesday. I'll see you on Wednesday. We'll take a look at those models once again to see what they're doing. And don't forget to join me for Acadiana Weather Today tomorrow morning at 7:30. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.